for me, at the end of the day, it's all about, driving less waste and being more efficient, whether it's in what we consume every day, how we make our products. It's just really, fully leveraging the resources we have on this earth.
Hello and welcome to the CSO Impact Podcast, where we talk to leaders in sustainability and see how work can make a positive impact on our planet. And today I'm really glad to talk to Tracy, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Colgate-Palmolive. And she's also a winner of our latest CSO awards in North America last September. And so I'm really happy to have you on the show today. And we will kind of go through a couple of things, initiatives, and also through maybe some health issues. Let's see how you can navigate this. And welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Harald. I'm thrilled to join, and I'm very honored because I know you've spoken to a lot of esteemed peers in the past, so I'm pleased to join that group. Thank you.
And thank you. Why don't we start with just telling a little bit about the company, Colgate-Palmolive.
Sure.
And what is sort of the industry you're in, and maybe some of the challenges, particularly that you are working on. And you've been a long time member of the company, I think 10 plus years. So you definitely know your way around. And congratulations on the last 5 years in being Chief Sustainability Officer, driving this change. Tell us a little bit about the company and some of the backgrounds.
Yeah, maybe briefly about myself first, and then I'll dive into Colgate. Actually, my LinkedIn is a little bit, it lies. I've been here 34 years almost.
Oh, wow.
So a long time. And that's not, I've, one of my kind of passions is to continue to learn and grow, and I've moved 11 times around the world and worked in all of our core categories, which I'll touch on in a minute. So most of my career, by the way, I grew up in the supply chain. So working in different various roles across the end-to-end supply chain, from manufacturing to running plants and regions, and also the commercial end with customer service and logistics. And that's important, and I'll touch on that in a minute.
You spent some time in Basel as well, right?
Right. My role before I came back to lead sustainability was working with leading the supply chain for the European division, which is based in Basel. In fact, I was there last week. Colgate, let's talk about Colgate for a minute. So Colgate is known as a consumer staples company, or better known as a CPG, a consumer packaged goods company. We are $20 billion and growing, and we have 4 core categories. So most of the audience would probably know our oral care, Colgate. Actually in Europe and in Basel and Germany, and Austria, people would know the GABA brand, which is Elmex and Meridol. We have many brands around the world. And we actually, a fun fact, when it comes to oral care, we are, the Colgate brand is the highest household penetrated brand in the world. We're in 6 out of 10 households. So the world uses 20 billion tubes of toothpaste a year, and we make almost half of that. And then we also have other, I would say, more regional brands in personal care and home care. So in Europe, you might know Sanex. In the US, you might know Irish Spring or soft soap. And then we have fabric softeners and cleaners like Suplene in Europe and Suavitel in the US. And then we also, and people don't often know this, we own a big premium pet care group called Hill's Pet Nutrition. So we own Science Diet and Science Plan. And that's a very fast growing business as well, particularly on the e-commerce side of things. So all of those businesses together pose, they're similar but different and pose different challenges. We can delve more into it, but at a high level, one of the big issues that we're focused on is using less plastic, because all of those products take plastic to package. And we also are, we think we punch above our weight when it comes to our climate program. We can talk a little more about that. And an area that's very materially and relevant to us, of course, is oral health. We're on a quest to make sure everybody has healthy mouths and a future to smile about around the world. So we have a program, longstanding program called Bright Smiles, Bright Futures, which brings oral health education to children in underserved communities all over the world. So that's important to teach children, first of all, and their families how to brush their teeth, give them access to product. So that's some highlights. Challenges, we can get into challenges, but I'm sure they're similar to our peers around data and reporting and, the usual. So we'll talk more about that, I'm sure.
Maybe start with the products themselves. The obvious thing, as you said, I saw there was a letter from you from 21 stating about your program until 25. So here we are in 25. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about especially the plastics recycling or what was recyclable and non-virgin plastics use? I think there's a lot of things that come with that little thing we use every day, and then at one point it gets discarded. So tell us a little bit how you tackled this, or what are the initiatives around these materials?
Yeah, so like all our peers, we have targets which we very carefully set around plastic, and I can talk about what those are. And that was tricky because, and you've seen, I won't name names, but you've seen some of food and beverage and some peers dial back on some of their targets. Yeah. I think back, you reference, and I'm saying that because you reference a time frame, and I think if we go back 5 years, it wasn't so easy back then to project forward and understand, what was the art of the possible, what would be realistic in terms of accomplishing these targets we set. But we carefully kind of considered all that. We are part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Global Commitment. So let me start there. If you're familiar with it, and many, I think over 400 companies are part of this, where in order to become part of that global commitment, we had to make a commitment to make all of our packaging plastic. It's focused on plastic packaging, recyclable, reusable, or compostable. We had to have a target around reduction of virgin plastic, which we do. Ours is to reduce the amount of virgin plastic that we use by 1/3 with a baseline year of 2019. And then we also had to commit to getting rid of all unnecessary and problematic plastic. And I can talk about how we define that. But primarily those are things like PVC and black carbon plastic, which doesn't do well in the recycling streams, which we have done that. So when we set out with those commitments, and if you go back to my mention of, oral health and our Colgate brands being as large as they are, they're a major part of our business, obviously. We knew we had to make the tube recyclable. And we felt that because we lead in that space, that we had to take the leadership position. And if we didn't do that, probably somebody else would do that for us. So, so we started that journey. It's been a journey actually back in 2015. So the old tube, before we moved to the technically recyclable tube, had multi-layers of different types of plastic and an aluminum layer in the middle, which obviously makes it not recyclable. So we set out to design a tube that was a monomaterial tube of plastic. And we deliberately chose a plastic that's already readily recyclable or prevalent in the recycling stream. So we chose number 2, HDPE. And if you think about it, that's like your milk jug here or your fabric softener, very rigid, opaque plastic. It's rigid, so we had to work hard to make it feel like a tube because consumers don't want to change their habits very easily. So that took some design work. And then the other important criteria was to make sure that it adequately protected what was inside. That's why the aluminum was in the old tube, to protect the flavor and the fluoride inside. So finally, we perfected that. And we didn't do it in a vacuum. Because we're a US-based company, we worked alongside APR, which is kind of a thought leader or recognized, NGO around plastic recycling in the U.S., just like PRE or Plastic Recyclers Europe and in Europe, and there's like-minded groups around the world. But we worked with them to make sure they would approve, if you will, our tube to be recyclable or ready for recycling. So we launched the first one at the end of 2019. And then I think what's important to mention here is we recognize that even though we make a lot of tubes, we don't make all the tubes. And by the way, we make many of our own tubes. That to truly get tubes as a packaging format to be recyclable, we had to scale it quickly. We had to scale it. And the best way to do that was to share the technology.
Yeah.
So working with our legal team, we came up with a technical bundle. And to date, we've shared with over 90, close to 100 different venues with different companies around the world, not just toothpaste, but if you stop to think about it, your mayonnaise or your hair care products all come in tubes, and not all of those are recyclable. So we shared that and encouraged or inspired, I might say, other companies to move to number 2 plastic. And we've made some great headway. So we hired a third-party company, Stina, in the U.S., to measure progress. So pleasingly, by the end of 2023, all of the major toothpaste manufacturers had converted to the number 2. 95% of tubes are now HDPE monomaterial, and over 75% of all tubes in the U.S. So this is important because one of the challenges we have is to make sure that the recycling infrastructure, or the MRFs, the material recovery facilities, accept the tube and recycle them. They were very skeptical at first because they couldn't tell a Colgate tube from another brand's tube. So until everybody converted, they weren't ready to accept them. So that's where we're focused right now. So we haven't even really told the consumer about it yet. So it's a very long process to get to move a packaging format that wasn't recyclable to become recyclable in practice and at scale, which is what Ellen MacArthur Foundation wants us to do.
Fantastic. And obviously we live in interesting times that we didn't know 21 when you wrote the letter in 2021. Who knew how 25 just would start in the first 3-4 months? Do you? Is there like a difference with kind of dancing around the topic, but do you maybe test things first in Europe and talk about it more because you have also experience here, and you mentioned that obviously you're very known about the European systems as well?
There's more regulations and things like PPWR in Europe and other regulations that are coming, and EUDR. So yes, we're focused on certainly first and foremost becoming compliant with all of those regulations. So we may accelerate some of our, let's say, new products that offer, new ways to engage with the packaging, new user experiences, or reformulations or concentrations or things like this. I also think, typically the European consumer is more ready for those types of things. But I would say but to answer your question, I would say we work in parallel around the world. And I've been pleasingly, I don't want to use the word surprise, but I've been pleased around, we're a global company. I didn't mention that. We sell our products in 200 countries around the world. So we're in Asia, we're in South Pacific, we're in Latin America, we're all over the world. There are people care all over the world. So they're interested in different types of products.
Yeah.
the infrastructure may not always be there, which is a challenge. But we do try to work, we try to meet the market or the consumer where they're at, and we do work in parallel to offer new, let's say, more sustainable products where it makes sense.
Right. And you mentioned you got a scale to make the price attractive and everything. It's almost like if you sell a car in the US and the California has a higher standard, then it's a California car all over the place, even if Nebraska might not take care of it or so.
Yeah, I think one thing we know is in our learnings around the world is consumers don't, for our products anyway, they don't want to compromise on price, quality, or convenience. So at least that's our going in position.
You already started a little bit about your own role, but you maybe you can share a little bit. How did you actually land in? What was your journey in the 3 decades in Colgate in order to move towards sustainability? Did it start in sustainability, or are you in legal? Are you a product person? Are you a supply chain? I think so. Talk us a little bit about your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was an engineer by training. So when I joined Colgate, I joined in the supply chain. And as I mentioned, the early kind of first third of my career was more on the manufacturing side in our operations. Yep. And then kind of I branched out a little bit here and there and worked on in the quality department and then in customer service and logistics in Europe. And I think for us, so maybe a little bit about our program at Colgate, and it kind of goes hand in hand with how I landed where I am today. Our environment, let me call it our environmental program, originally kind of is very well anchored, and I'll use the word embedded in our supply chain. So we have been measuring our greenhouse gas emissions, our utilities, our reduction in, electricity, water, waste to landfill since 2002. So over 2 decades of data. And this was all, working with our supply chain, with our operations. And it made a lot of sense because a lot of the efficiency initiatives, which are good for our operations, were also good for the planet. In fact, we've had over a decade a target to invest at minimum of 5% of our annual capital expenditures in projects that we call good for the planet. So in our plants, that would be things like more efficient lighting or boilers or, things that both make the plant more efficient, but also are smarter for the planet, have a less of an impact. It could be wastewater treatment, things like this. So all that to say, we're on a quest, as I know all my peers are, to really embed sustainability into daily processes and decision-making and into the functions. So we're really on a quest to embed sustainability across our functions. And I think, supply chain is one of the functions where we've been doing this for a while. And so it was a natural evolution in the case of Colgate. In some of my roles, I was the sustainability champion earlier in my career, but then I came back to headquarters, which is for us in New York, at the beginning of 2018 to lead global supply chain strategy and global sustainability. And so if you think back to that time, it was an amazing time where I think there was the beginning of the era of more private sector collaboration, even more, growing partnerships with NGOs, et cetera, a more of a recognition, IPCC, of the climate situation and the need for scenario analysis, and even plastic as a major issue. All of these things were escalating back then. And companies were building new strategies around sustainability, and we were doing the same. So we built both. My role back then was to guide the company to build both the 2025 global supply chain strategy, but also the sustainability and what we call the social impact strategy, as you mentioned. And So we did this, and I didn't do it by myself by any stretch of the means. I worked with subject matter experts across the company. And then, we started rolling it out, and I said, I worked with my then boss, which was the head of supply chain, to say, there's a lot of work to be done here, and I think I should focus on sustainability. So that's when I pivoted to become the chief sustainability officer, at that time still reporting into the supply chain.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, but 2 years into COVID, we moved the role from supply chain to now reporting to the head of growth and strategy, which I think is an important pivot because there was a recognition that sustainability is part of our company growth strategy, not just in the supply chain. So now I report to the head of growth and strategy, and I'm at around the table, if you will, with the head of supply chain marketing, R&D, or we call it technology, and others that I have to work with to continue the embedding, if you will.
And you mentioned very early about your peers, and you're probably in the same boat. Preparing reports, looking for data, and can you just maybe tell us when you my notion right now, if you say, oh, we started so early in supply chain, that means there is data. So do you have now, you press a button and AI goes through your systems, and 2 hours later everything is ready, or is it a 4-month process? How is it really to make these reports where you are or for you?
Well, that would be the dream, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We're not there yet. I think people know that's where all companies want to go. Data, whether it's sustainability data or other data, is always the big challenge. So, for many years, all of climate data is estimated based on invoices, et cetera, from our sites. And we use different systems and tools to collect it. And it is a laborious manual process. And we're getting better, and we're working. There's many companies out there now offering platforms to help, companies like ours get better at data collection and management. So it's a journey. Yes, there's many, new companies emerging out there with platforms that help companies like ours on this journey to collect our data. So it's getting better, but enter in now the next big sort of hurdle or challenge that we're facing is that with the regulations like CSRD, although delayed a bit, but there's states in the U.S., there's ISSB. I'm sure your audience is familiar with some of these different regulations around the world. We are now embedding and working much more closely with our finance team. We have an ESG controller now helping us. But we're entering a whole new level of data rigor where, we have to be able to put the processes and controls in place around the data, unlike we've ever done before, and make sure that the source is easily traceable. And so, this is adding a whole new layer of rigor to the process that we are working through together.
And that's probably a team of 5-10 people who are involved when it's high season for the report, or?
Yeah, I mean, it takes longer than we want. I would say when it comes to resources, my team, I've done lots of benchmarking around sustainability organization, and I feel my team is the right size for our company. My team proper is not large, and we focus on environment, product, and packaging. But we also have an extended team. So within global functions or business units, we have some dedicated people. So we kind of are a network or a matrix across, including finance. So as I mentioned, we have an ESG controller, and she has a couple of people she works with. So it's hard to say because they pull our team into it, and it's always a balancing act to make sure we're not spending more time on reporting and less time on action. But you're right that at certain times of the year, it's it is more focused on the reporting side, like this time of year. But yeah, it's a constant balancing act.
You mentioned, let's say, peers and community, and I wanted to maybe just talk about that a little bit outside of your company, because I know you are involved with a couple of initiatives, meetings, women leadership initiatives. How do you exchange with your peers? How do you learn together? And is there maybe an initiative that you are proud of or you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, a few. I think one thing I love about the role I'm in now, more so than any other that I've had over the 3 decades that I've been at Colgate, is it's a very external facing role. And I think that's somewhat by design because, the cliche, I say it's almost cliche, but it's an absolutely true statement that no one company can do this alone. So we have to partner and work together and, work with external stakeholders, be it NGOs, even getting input from investors and our customers, which are the retailers out there, et cetera, and peers, right? And pre-competitive and sharing, best practices and learnings. So one of the important partnerships that we're very engaged in is called the Consumer Goods Forum, where we work together in what we call coalitions on plastic waste, on deforestation, on human rights, things like this. I'm a board member for the United Nations Global Compact. In fact, I chair the board for the Network USA. I'm very proud of that because I think the principles that sit behind the UNGC are very important, especially now because it's kind of it sits over here, totally independent of the politics out there. And the SDGs is something that the world is trying to figure out how we're going to tackle together, the Sustainable Development Goals. And then more recently, I am working with an esteemed group of my peers across different businesses to start a women's leadership program, NGO called Sustainable Women of the World. The founder is Ann Lee Jeffs, who's extremely passionate. I love her passion. And she pulled us all together. It's early days, but we're focused on promoting the talent in this space and, bringing women up through their positions in companies to levels of leadership around sustainability. Ellen Weinreb does a report, and I don't quote me exact number, but I think it's over 60% of the chief sustainability officers are women. We could talk about that quickly in a second. And we're also focused on helping women have a voice or with thought leadership. So, just like we're doing today, getting our messages out in publishing and I think women need to do more of that, quite frankly.
Yeah, I can only second that because at the CSO Awards in Germany, in Europe and North America, we both time had about 75% of the top 100 were women. And then from there, the nominees, the top 20, and there's a rigorous process, not like, oh yeah, we like these people, we do, but it's a whole process with partners. Yeah. And this time in Europe, all the 6 winners were women. So
that's great.
It's definitely a leadership trait. How would you describe that? What are maybe some of the leadership traits that CSO needs? And is there a special quality there where women are shining?
Well, there's definitely certain leadership kind of competencies that help, I think, CSOs to move their agenda forward, which are kind of unique. So I think, first and foremost, humility and empathy are very important. Not that men don't have that, but I do think that kind of comes more readily with the territory. For women, we tend to kind of double down to prove ourselves technically, and that kind of, I think, leads to this element of humility and empathy. And then you must be collaborative. You have to have the nature of collaborative, and you have to be comfortable influencing others where you don't have, let's say, control. So, to get our strategy done, it takes everyone in the company, all business units, and I don't own all that. That's the CEO's job, right? So I have to kind of meet people where they're at and help them, guide them, and bring them along. So you have to be comfortable with that. And I don't know. I have 4 kids, so maybe as a mother of 4 kids, I can never control them, but I want to guide them. So maybe there's a little bit of that piece. I don't want to say being a CSO is like being a mother, but I just think that's kind of how we're wired a little bit. So that's purely Anne's point of view.
Great that you point out the young generation. So maybe as a closing question, what are maybe some of the tips of young people want to go into sustainability? Maybe they're unsure whether the corporation is the right fit, or is an NGO, or is it other impact work? What is maybe some of the tips you would give a young Anne of today to start looking into maybe this career path you did?
I love that question because I'm trying to guide my own young adult children right now in that space, and a quick whatever you want to call it story. We just yesterday and the day before had a 2-day internal sustainability summit at Colgate, and we hosted as part of the summit a youth panel with Gen Z and younger people. And it's just amazing to listen to them. They're incredibly articulate and plugged in. I mean, these people know what's going on because they're consuming massive amount of social media information. And, they want to make change. They want to drive change. They also recognize that they didn't cause the issues we're facing today, but that they want to play a role. So I think that's fascinating. So how do they do that? And I try as much as I can to engage with young people. They reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I can't talk to everybody, but one of the pieces of advice I give people is you don't have to follow a career path of, you have sustainability in your title. And, this whole idea of every function plays a role, whatever role you move into, whether it's procurement, finance, HR, IT, the legal, the list goes on. If you're passionate about that space, you can drive change. We need you in those different functions to drive change. So whatever company you join, start by looking for a company who takes this stuff seriously and is authentic. And you can do that by reading their reports, et cetera, or talking to people, and then pursue kind of whatever your chosen kind of profession is. Try to pivot that over, ask how you can help. I need more people like that, even within Colgate. I never turn away someone who says, how can I help? But is in a different function. So that's important. You don't have, because many companies have sustainability teams and they're not that big. So, look for ways you can contribute in your own kind of expertise, if you will. My son right now is very into 3D printing, which, if you think about it, is a very sustainable production. If that can be scaled, it completely eliminates waste because it's a build up, not a tear down kind of thing. For me, at the end of the day, it's all about, driving less waste and being more efficient, whether it's in what we consume every day, how we make our products. It's just really, fully leveraging the resources we have on this earth.
Thank you so much, Anne, for being here on the podcast and taking us full circle from your early start to talking to the young generation and everything in between. Congrats on your initiatives, and see you soon again in New York and other places around the world. Thank you so much.
Harald, it was wonderful to join you this morning here in the U.S. and have this chat. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.